IVM.
Good day, my beautiful Ayushi.
Hi, Tash.
How are you today?
I'm feeling great.
Are you though?
Actually, that's a lie. I totally lied right now. It's been a very hectic day. Super high on the adulting scale.
Yep.
But not going to complain. It's just part of life. Has to happen. It's a Wednesday.
Absolutely. On that note, listeners, welcome back to yet another episode of Agla Station Adulthood. Ayushi and I are in the studio today, and it is a very special month. It is World Mental Health Month.
Mental Health Day was, I think,
it
about
went
10
by
days
a
ago.
couple of. So we thought, it's a month worth. This is the relevance of the month. We are going to discuss this. And Ayushi and I are clearly not experts, as you know, about anything.
At all. And least of all, I think, to give anyone advice on mental health. That's...
नहीं, हम खुद को भी मतलब क्या ही advice दे सकते हैं, कुछ नहीं.
Ram.
Ram. So anyway, on that note, early on only we'd like to introduce our in-house
clinical psychologist.
Yes, you might have heard her on IVM podcast, other show, Advertising is Dead. We have Sonali Gupta with us today.
Yay!
Thank you.
Hi, Sonali.
Hello, happy to be here.
Thank you
for joining us.
Yeah, we're so happy to have you here.
Also because we've wanted to discuss mental health before in a lot of our other episodes, we always veer into mental health. And then we realize that while this is totally valid and relevant, we would like to speak with someone who has, first of all, an education in this, because I think it's very important, an experience. Like you said, you've been in this field for 15 plus years, so that kind of gives you credibility. And we don't want to, like Tash said earlier, we don't want to say more than we know.
Yeah.
So it's good to have you here. We'll ask some questions, kind of get into it.
I want to start with the most basic one, क्योंकि आजकल fashion है, trend तो चल ही रहा है. सब लोग mental health बोल रहे हैं. Can you please elucidate for us what is mental health?
Okay, so, I think in the last couple of years, we speak far more openly about mental health, whether it's on social media, in conversations. So the idea of mental health is primarily you being able to take care of yourself. Mental health is a holistic concept which involves being able to take care of your own self. And maybe that's why self-care is the new buzzword out there. It also is about you feeling that you can take decisions that seem to come from a space, from an authentic space. Mental health is largely about your functionality in relationships. How functional do you feel across relationships? So whether it's friendships, whether it's somebody you're dating, with your parents. And lastly, also the most important bit about your ability to regulate your own moods. And yes, the most important bit also which I missed out is how functional you are when it comes to work. To what degree do your moods impact whether you can go to work, whether you can't go to work, whether you're able to finish tasks, do you end up being seen as flaky? Are you productive enough? And it also spills over to other parameters like, are you sleeping well? Are you engaging in bedtime procrastination, scrolling through social media at 2 in the morning, because you're not getting sleep? Are you drinking way too much? Are you...
Okay, I'm feeling very forcefully attacked by this definition. So, Sonali, just wrap it up. I'm feeling mentally attacked.
Possibly you need a session after this.
I don't have time. Which is a whole other thing we'll get into.
Yeah.
But I think that... I don't mean to cut you off. You can complete it. Sorry.
So it's about, whether your parameters of sleep, food, how much are they impacted? Are you overeating? Are you not eating? Are you not sleeping? Are you oversleeping? Are you engaging in bedtime procrastination? All these parameters along with how tired you really feel. We have become this generation where everybody is tired.
Yeah.
Always tired, and always working, both of them put together.
Yeah, it's like Nanette. Everyone has watched Nanette in this room.
Oh my God.
She says, I identify as tired, which is all of us. All of us.
At all times.
I completely understand the gravity of mental health. We've said it before. We spoke about it in our physical health episode that we can't seem to distinguish the mind from the body.
Yeah.
They go hand in hand. And your entire definition was basically that.
Physical habits also.
So many physical and mental habits at the same time constitute this well-being balance. of...
True. And just keeping in mind with what you said, I think it's largely also part of, huge conditioning where you are trained that it happens to everybody. Like when it comes to women, that, you'll have difficult milestones. You work through it. Your parents have, your mom, your grandmother will say, I did it, I managed it. So it's a part of conditioning where you're said that you have to deal with it on your own. At the same time, the huge definition of resilience is also, in my opinion, recognizing when we are struggling with something and we fail to recognize it.
Yeah.
So our resilience grows in moments even when we can identify that we are struggling with a stressor and we need to pay attention to what our body and our mind is saying. So having said that, I don't think it always helps if you're going to, always say that I'll deal with it on my own. It will show up in your body, psychosomatic ways.
No, 100%, you're right. It shows up regularly.
So identifying when is the time that you need to reach out for help is where the important distinction lies.
As a person who started therapy 5 months ago, I had been dealing with a very bad mental health slump, let's call it that, because I don't know what else to call it, for about 1.5-2 years. And I kept pushing it because I was like, no, I have to start going for therapy. But I also couldn't physically bring myself to go for therapy because that getting there is the biggest step. How do you get into that room for the first time? So finally I got there, and all that baggage that had been there, and I decided कि अभी तो मतलब अब बहुत हो गया. It's not. I was becoming a weird person to myself. Like my functionality was highly affected. This whole sleeping thing, overeating thing, all of that was in play. And before I went to therapy, I thought, maybe it's just because I'm not working out and all that. So 1-2 महीने मैंने ये भी सोचा कि छोड़ो सब कुछ, अभी सिर्फ every day I'll exercise. That's when I started my 100 healthy days. And I tried to be healthy every day. And that did help a little bit. And I feel maybe because of that change that I got the courage to even start going to therapy. So yeah, that's been my journey thus far in the last 7-8 months of actually finally coming face to face with this beast.
But this, I would like to say at the start, on the offset only, we should mention, we all agree that mental health is very, very important. It's a critical part of your everyday functioning, and it really matters to your consistency and I think ability to survive as a long functioning human being. You want to have that 80 years of good life.
Yeah, as good as it gets.
As it can get.
Yes.
So this really helps if you kind of take stock and address situations at the time that they're happening as opposed to letting them fester.
Absolutely. But, as you said, I, thanks for trusting and sharing that. And I think it takes for most people a really long time before you can recognize that you need to reach out for help. It's not very often that when a process starts, when you begin to feel tired or when that slump starts, you recognize it, you think, कि शायद चला जाएगा बस अभी ये just this is a bad this is a phase, this is a bad week, I'm going to be okay post it. Just the only thing is sometimes this just a week can last like for 6 months and it's just not getting over there at all. So it is always hard. I think the first step is the hardest, and then if you can find a therapist who works for you in that sense or a mental health professional, then I think it gets easier from there. I'm sure the first step was the hardest, right?
Yeah. And actually now what's the hard part is implementing those and living, because before that you are ignorant, you don't know कि ठीक है ये मेरे साथ ये problems है. एक बार पता चल गया तो it's not like you can even ignore it. You know about it, but also then between knowing about it and then acting upon it and actually changing your daily habits. That is another thing, because we as a generation would much rather, quote unquote, my friend Rega here, we would rather scroll through mental health memes and just like look at that kind of stuff on the internet without actually changing our daily habits. We are looking for a dramatic escape.
But for most things.
Yeah, exactly. So that is also very like that middle part. The first step is so tough only. ठीक है वो मैंने कर लिया. Now the second part is seeming tougher, and some days I'm like, when I'm going to therapy, I'm thinking, again I have to go today. Then I'll have to talk about these things. And then I also know I have to change these 5,000 things. then I get like burdened by the stress of that also.
Absolutely.
This seems very counterproductive.
But what do you do? Ignorance is bliss in this case sometimes, I feel.
It's bliss till the time it comes to, it will come to bite you eventually. So you can keep pushing it for years, and when it's going to manifest in ways where you're not working, you're not being productive, it is going to come and backfire. Having said that, reaching out for help and being in therapy, it's a hard process. Being in therapy is not easy. It's a lot of hard work. So everybody who reaches out makes the first call. I'm like, there are going to be a lot of water work. So please sign up for it. The process is not that simple that you start the sessions and everything is smooth. You are going to cry. There are days so there's this meme doing the rounds, which is, I literally pay my therapist, to talk. And when my therapist says, do you want to talk about it now, today? And I say no. So a lot of therapy sessions are, exactly that, where a client will come and we are going to be discussing a relationship, a conflict with a parent, and I ask them, do we talk about it today or do you want to park it? Like, let's park it, Sonali. This is a terrible week. So I'm like, okay, let's park it. And that's absolutely fine. People need to take time and park issues and come back when they are ready for it. Therapy is a process.
Ayushi has put her hand up. Miss Ayushi, koi question hai?
No, because again, this is a respectful discussion. But like that to me is so bizarre as a person. Like that's a concept that I don't understand what you just said to me. Only because the fact that somebody has signed up for therapy has made that initial effort is like, okay, this is it. We know that we have a problem, but we're doing this to address it. Like when you go to a doctor, he gives you whatever it is. It's comparable to your physical health, right? That's the entire concept that we've been trying to talk about in society, is that your mental health is equal to your physical health, if not sometimes even more important, because it affects your physical health.
But it's far more complicated. You can choose what concern do you tell your therapist when, and when are you emotionally ready to talk about what do you want to talk about in a session. The client always has the right to choose that. And there are a wide range of issues. So if you have, let's say, a presentation lined up immediately after a session, we are not going to be meeting, you're going to be going on a holiday for the next 3 weeks, then we don't need to discuss a topic that will leave you with emotional floodgates open. I might as well, or if I am traveling, let's say, then we need to be mindful of what we talk about, because sometimes it will open up a lot of narratives in your head. And then you may not be ready for it. Also, if a client has struggled with trauma in the past, like we were discussing, they sometimes need to come to a point where they are stable before they can talk to me about their trauma. So while it's similar to physical health, it's far more complicated. And we can't treat it with the same analogy all the time, because so while the meme is doing the rounds, it's very true of what happens in therapy, but you respect your client's right for them to share when they want. And trust me, clients come around to it. They come around to sharing when they want, and the change only happens when people are ready for it. So people, if they talk when they are not ready, they also feel very threatened and attacked. They are not emotionally ready. So most important it is for them to reach a point where they feel, now I can not just share about it, but I can also handle the tears. I can also go back home and still be fine, right? And most clients, like I work primarily with adult clients, teenagers to adult clients, most of them are also, they have studies to take care of, they have exams, they have family, relationships, jobs to hold. So also they need to reach their point of readiness.
And oftentimes you will go to therapy because there's maybe one thing that has like really pushed you there, like one problem, let's call it a problem. But you go to therapy and you realize, oh, this is the one reason I have come to therapy. I'm only going to talk about this. But the human brain is so much more complicated, and your entire personality is just a series of everything else that has happened from childhood till today. So how can I just go to therapy to talk about one problem when everything else is also my problem? But it takes time, and that's the thing you're speaking about, this readiness. When you get there yourself, it takes so many sessions for your own brain to open up and be like, मेरा ये भी problem है, मेरा वो भी problem है, आज ये discuss करेंगे, आज वो discuss करेंगे.
Absolutely. So I have a Google form which I send to prospect, to clients who would want to start therapy, and the Google form has what concern do you want to work around. So somebody would write struggling with burnout at work, and that's what I would want to work around. We started with burnout. We would have worked around relationships, friendships, sexuality, parental baggage. We have dealt with grief. We have dealt all of it. The burnout was just tip of the iceberg. And it didn't stop there at all. But we did start with burnout. And by the time, if it's a year that one has worked with a client or a little bit more, you pretty much end up feeling that you have worked through so many issues at the end of it.
Absolutely. That's true. On that note, should we take a little break before we get into our next segment where we talk about some more detailed things?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you, friends. Be right back.
Hey everybody, welcome to another awesome week on the IVM Podcast Network. If you are not following us on social media, please make sure you do. And why aren't you following us? I've been asking you for almost a year now to follow us. Please do follow us. One of the things that I do ask you guys to do every so often is if you hear something you like, take a screenshot, tag us on social media. As I mentioned, we're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. So this week our Tamil podcast, Ponnai Selvan, is going to complete 100 episodes this Wednesday. Make sure you tune in for that. On Cyrus Says, Cyrus is joined by Roshan Netalkar. Cyrus and Roshan discuss the eco-friendly music concert that Roshan is putting together. Also check out last week's Cock and Bull. Raj Kaushal, an old friend of mine, was on that episode, and we had a really interesting conversation that spanned all kinds of different subjects. On Advertising is Dead, Varun Dagirala is joined by an old friend and head of agency partnerships and creative services at Google India, Aditya Swami. They talk about the evolving marketer in today's time. On Football Should Ball, hosts Gaurav, Karthik and Siva round up the weekend's fixtures, most notably Liverpool versus Tottenham. On Golgappa with Trupti Khamkar, Trupti is joined by Mandar Bhide, a stand-up comic who talks to her about the business of content and some fun experiences doing shows. Speaking of shows, on Mr. and Mrs. Binge Watch, Janice and Anirudh talk about HBO's new teen drama series Euphoria. And on the Geek Fruit podcast, we have a treat for the Breaking Bad fans. Join hosts Jishnu and Tejas as they discuss El Camino, a Breaking Bad movie. Simplified is back again with part 4 of their 150th episode. In this episode, they talk about the implications of Brexit and the transformation of Dubai. Speaking of other countries, on Postcards from Nowhere, Utsav talks about his trip to Turkey with his friends and how you can curate your travel to make them the most fun and memorable experiences. On The Origin of Things, Chuck narrates an interesting story about a Brazilian company that struggled its way through World War II and the Great Depression. On IVM Likes, IVM staffers Jude, Ritika and Madhuri talk about pop culture that moved them and made them more empathetic as people. They also recommend some really cool things that you can check out. And with that, let's get you on with your show.
And welcome back to Agla Station Adulthood. I am in the studio. I'm Rytasha. In the studio with my co-host and host Ayushi.
Do you think they were going to mix us up?
And no, of course not. You speak poshly and I speak like this. And we are joined by our wonderful expert clinical psychologist guest today, Sonali, who has been talking to us about therapy and mental health. Sonali, we discussed how hard it is to take that first step and get to therapy. But I also want to discuss the points that lead us up to there, the feelings that I think a lot of our generation is going through, or maybe just cause there's so much talk around the words anxiety and depression. I don't know if we are using it loosely or if we are just reading too many memes and articles about it, but yes. They seem to have become a little bit of a buzzword, because I find myself saying I haven't been clinically diagnosed with any of these things. Yes. I don't know, but मैं बोलती हूँ I'm feeling very anxious today, मुझे anxiety हो रही है, मैं ये चीजें बोलती हूँ. तो Ayushi, should we talk about this? Ayushi is still laughing at me in a corner.
No, that's a lie. I am not laughing at you at all. I just think that we fundamentally have disagreements on this. Not just you and I feel me and a fair amount of people have this discussion, and it's gotten trickier actually to discuss something like this. I will admit I was very nervous to do this episode.
Yeah.
I was not 100% comfortable as I have been with the other ones, simply because my approach to mental health and coping is different from a lot of people. And I think that even as someone, I'm sure I would benefit from therapy. When I say I'm sure, I'm 100% certain I would, because there's no harm in talking to someone who's completely removed from your life. The minute bias is gone, you're actually getting a good sounding board, essentially. And I'm not saying that that's all therapy is, but from my basic understanding of what the bare bone structure is. However, whether it's socialization or an inherent personality trait or the kind of media or books or fiction that I've read all my life, I never I have not been someone who likes to use these words to describe a feeling. Because I do think it's being very diluted. I tell you this all the time. And I know that the minute I say this, it's going to be like, oh, you just think everyone's a snowflake and you're so... No, not at all. I think there are people who have issues and they're struggling with them, and it does affect the functioning of their life. Like you explained that sort of the definition in the beginning. And you should reach out for help, and you should get the right kind of help so it's constructive.
So, I know what you're saying. A lot of people, feel, including, a lot of young people in their 40s, 50s, who feel that, what is it that's leading us to talk about mental health so much? So I think the terms are being used more frequently. Whether it's I am depressed, whether I'm feeling anxious, they are being used more. They have become part of our language, right? And as you were saying, they are the buzzwords. They make it to conversation. We have so many memes around it, all of it. So they are making to a lot of those conversations. The concern around it is that when it comes to at least anxiety, all of us struggle with anxiety at different levels.
Okay.
And before a presentation, you would feel anxious. Before an exam, you would feel anxious. You would feel anxious before your first date. I think we need to be more clear about when the anxiety becomes higher and when it needs attention. But otherwise, anxiety is an emotion all of us struggle with. When it comes to, there's a difference in we feeling sad and we feeling depressed. So every time we say, I am feeling depressed, a lot of times people are feeling sad or low, but they may not be feeling depressed. So I completely agree to the fact that we need to begin by also being very mindful of what we are talking and the language we are using around it. At the same time, we need to be mindful about how do we learn to take care of ourselves and recognize when do we need to reach out to another person. Because I don't think everybody needs to be in therapy. There are some people who do very well in life without being in therapy. They learn to reach out to their friends, they learn to reach out to their family, or they'll reach out, they'll read and they'll feel better, or they'll have other mediums around it.
They've developed other techniques for
themselves. Yes, at the same time, to each their own.
Yeah.
So therapy is not the answer to it. The answer is trying to figure out when is it that you can't cope with it on your own and when do you need to reach out. Also recognizing the intensity of the concern and the frequency, right? On a weekly basis, all of us will be anxious about one thing. But if I'm anxious all the time, 7 days, then it's a huge concern around it. So I think the only solution lies in recognizing the intensity, frequency, and learning, to be mindful of our language. And maybe, as you're saying, Ayushi, that would help to, to not dilute the problem. Then people will have a better understanding of it.
And it also gives more credibility to the people who actually suffer from a debilitating level of these, depression or
the
anxiety.
Intensity and frequency, essentially, because these words are actually very good, because I also never understood it this way. Ki like aap intensity or frequency pe thoda dhyan do, to then you can start observing your own patterns. You start observing ki like mere saath actually kya ho raha hai.
Because I do think that even what the examples that you were giving before your first date, a job interview, before you perform or whatever it is, in my mind, when you said those things, I was thinking more nervousness, as opposed to that would have been my first reaction is that I'm just nervous. It's fine.
Yes.
I'll finish it and it'll go away.
Absolutely.
Now, so that's like that minimum thing of, that's where I personally feel that when we use words like anxious or maybe depressed around that, it might take away from the actual importance of dealing with something like that. Maybe I've misunderstood it entirely, but that is, how I've grown up thinking about stress and nervousness versus
anxiety
anxiety. Does that make sense? Am I explaining it right?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. So nervousness is a word which is interchangeably used with anxiety.
Right.
Gotcha.
Okay.
So these are interchangeable terms.
Yeah.
But I know, like, before an exam paper, I would be nervous.
Yeah.
Earlier, and while growing up, we would just say that
nervous.
before. Yeah, I would be nervous. Now, even the kids would say things like, I'm anxious before.
Yeah.
So, it's like the term, that makes
Because
it.
you're hearing like 11-year-olds say, I'm getting anxious about
Yes.
this, and you feel stressed because you think, oh no, such a young person should not be having to deal with
Absolutely.
a high level of stress like this. So,
And I understand that. At the same time, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's the emotion. When you feel nervous, you are feeling anxious.
Yeah, correct.
When we are feeling nervous, we are feeling that I don't think I have control because it's an examination. So I am feeling anxious.
Yeah.
The emotion is of anxiety. But while we grow up, even I relate to the fact that I would have said that, I'm feeling nervous. And now that has changed. And of course, when it comes to depression, clearly, we need to be mindful.
Yeah.
On a daily basis, a bad day would make me feel sad. It doesn't make me, depression, the intensity is far higher, as we were saying. So, yes.
no, it's good to, I think, distinguish these things from each other.
I
think that's
personally
important.
like that now we do have the vocabulary and that we do use the word anxious and anxiety. Because uske pehle, you have that feel. Like for me, I don't know. Now you are the professional, so you will tell me. I'm pointing to my chest region right now, listeners. You can't see. But this entire part of my body, like I start to feel extremely like, I can't breathe. I'm feeling very uneasy. And I don't equate that with being nervous. Because मेरे लिए nervous कुछ और है. So when this feeling used to happen always, and I couldn't really find a word for it, and then I found the word anxiety, and I feel like at least mentally I'm feeling better कि at least I've recognized, चलो ये feeling अंदर हो रही है, anxiety हो रही है, बैठो 5 minutes, breathe in, breathe out, do your thing, just connect, ground yourself, come back.
So, yes, I think language is very personal. So, what it means for Ayushi, what it means for me, what it means for me and for you, it can be very different. And when it comes to the diagnosis, the term that's used is anxiety. But language semantically can be very different. So, Ayushi can be nervous and you could be anxious, and both of you could be feeling the same physical
thing.
symptoms.
Yeah.
Your semantics around it are very difficult.
So what are the physical symptoms, if you can just elucidate on them?
Around anxiety,
Yeah.
you mean? So around anxiety, the physical symptoms would be about people feeling palpitations, people feeling their hands are trembling, they would feel the heart is beating way too fast, they feel they have difficulty, they have to take deep breaths, they are not able to sit in one place, there's massive restlessness, there is also a feeling that they feel they are stuck. They feel the sense of suffocation at those moments. Also, you may feel a dry mouth, for example. All these are signs of anxiety per se, and they can exist even when you don't have an anxiety disorder. So there are people who struggle with an anxiety disorder, and then there are people who have high levels of anxiety. So both those are two different by itself.
Okay. We actually took some questions on our Instagram, both of our Instagrams a couple of days ago. I think we shared them with you as well, and we talked about them. And some of the ones that were repeated quite constantly was, and I don't mean to get in, keep talking about anxiety because many facets of mental health.
Absolutely.
But kind of going back to something that we were discussing, Tash and I, is that it has become commonplace for people to misuse the word or use the word how they feel, but also there are people now who are dealing with more anxiety than it used to be in, say, generations above us.
Yeah.
Whether that's because we're
Now we have
deciding
a
to recognize
vocabulary.
it and with the vocabulary, or whether it's truly that the stressors of modern day life have evolved, that now more and more people genuinely have to deal with this kind of mental illness. I don't know the exact word for it, but it would come on the scale of it, right?
Yeah, it would.
Okay.
It would, anxiety would feature in the context of mental illnesses. So in my work over the last 15 years, maybe in the last 3 to 5 years categorically, anxiety now tops the list when it comes to clients who reach out in therapy. And, it was never so high before. it's now that anxiety does top the list around it, And, I've written a book, which is going to come out next year, in which I've clearly spoken about how there's a change in our landscape of relationships. Right. And by this, I don't just mean intimate relationships. Of course, the landscape of intimate relationship has changed. Also, friendships have changed. Our relationships have changed in the context of social media. I grew up at a time where maybe I got my first phone at 23, 24, 22, I don't remember. And calling people was still fashionable back then. Now, calling people is no longer fashionable. So having said that, like so many clients would say things like, for entire week, first human being I'm talking face to face. Wow, and I sometimes feel a lot of my clients, live alone, they are not from the city per se. And these all reasons also account for at least in an urban setup like Bombay, they do account for this heightened sense of anxiety, right? There was a time where we would talk face to face. Now, even if you have to fix a meeting, you generally just SMS or WhatsApp and I think also technology overall is triggering by itself.
Oh man. So true. So on those two things of, you have clients and people you work with that they live singular lives and in this urban demographic that we're talking about. And then combine that with this excessive screens and constant stimuli that's in our life, whether it's a phone, laptop, TV, even in the Ola and Uber, there is a screen in front of you the minute you get in. So you can't escape it at all anymore. And I think the combination of these two things in direct, opposition to these things not being huge parts of our parents' or grandparents' lifestyles. They lived in families. They lived where there was a lot of these quote-unquote support systems in your home. Means you were not alone. You were surrounded by
a community,
whatever that looked like. Also, when you came home from work was over. It didn't follow you home.
Absolutely.
The bully at school didn't follow you home, Now the bully's on your screen. You have to deal with him at lunchtime and you come home to him.
Absolutely.
That's why I think kids and their interaction with each other has changed fundamentally because they can't escape these things from school. When you came home, you could cut it off, Now you have people that totally love and care for you. And I'm not saying that this means parents shouldn't work or they have to be at home to take care of their kid. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that now stress and stimuli, whatever it is that's setting you off, follows you everywhere.
Absolutely. And you're spot on about it. And, one of the things that I've also spoken about, in the book, even otherwise I tell my clients, even something as simple as waking up to the messages that we wake up to, right? These messages could be my WhatsApp, my email.
We're all shaking our heads, right?
It could be somebody who has sent me a message on Instagram. It could be, somebody... I have woken up to too much information. After a restful sleep, I've woken up to too much information. There was earlier time, even 5 years back, right? 5 years back, still life was not so complicated. Where you would wake up, by the time you got to work, 9 o'clock, you would start writing an email. Now I've woken up at 6 in the morning. I've got an email from work. I'm still in my head planning what should my reply be. So even if, as you rightly said, even if I answer the email at 10, 6 to 10, I have spent enough time.
Your mental space has gone.
Absolutely.
For sure.
And the same thing, right? Like how you put it, the bully follows you on social media. The bully is going to post a comment, which only you and the bully understand, but that's a derogatory comment then.
Course,
So a lot of our concerns have also, and I don't think we have a choice that we can't do social media or we can't live with technology.
We can't really go backwards anymore.
We can't.
That's kind of, that's been made very clear in terms of the way that we work and interact with each other. It's
Absolutely.
Now, the whole fabric of relationships has changed.
Absolutely.
I think it has. So that's why when we got all these questions from people, a lot of them just basically asked, how do you cope with anxiety? How do you cope with
depression,
loneliness?
A lot of these problems do actually have increased in the technology
Absolutely.
age. Though.
I don't think people, in one of the studies I was reading, which said that people who are in their 20s, 30s feel far more lonely than people in their 60s.
Oh, wow. And why is that so?
I'm assuming, if you are in your 60s, at least in an Indian setup, I'm saying.
You probably have a partner. You have a partner.
You either have a partner, yes, right. You either have a partner, you also have community of extended relatives. You have built this over a time when there was no technology.
Right.
You learn to also do a lot of things, build hobbies, all of it. But for a lot of young people, it's one of the articles I was reading this morning was about how, thanks to capitalism, you don't meet people anymore. Reasons as to why we don't meet people anymore, right? It's like, the same meme, and I'm a big fan of these memes because they say a lot, is about that every weekend is like, chal agle weekend milte hain. And then the next weekend also, chal agle weekend milte hain. And you never end up.
We're just cancelling plans or finding ways to cancel plans.
Or also, modern life is so much about every time a friend says that, listen, can't make it, there's somebody on the other side who heaves a sigh of relief saying, I didn't have to cancel this plan.
Thank God, mujhe bhi nahi jana tha. This is me.
So, the way to cope with it, you can't do away with technology. So I don't think that's the way. I think one of the ways to cope with it is to find out, even if it's a handful of people, figure out what your sense of community lies. Right. Where does your community lie? And I know it's easier said than done. You don't find it right away.
No, but this is something we agree with, and I personally do. Remember, I wanted to do an entire episode on community.
Yeah.
Because I think I think it doesn't fix everything,
Absolutely.
But I think there's various kinds, like your friends, your family, perhaps your I don't want to say religious affiliation. It could be.
It could be anything.
Of course it can be.
A hobby or even your professional thing. These communities around you, you can... I do want to encourage people, and on your behalf, I don't want to speak for you, but I do want to encourage people to rest on these communities, to lean back on them and, like you said, try to create them. I guess that's easier said than done. But
absolutely. And, as you said, all these communities, they add a lot to people's resilience.
Yeah.
So, whether it's friendship, like for a lot of people, religion also is a community there. Or for a lot of people, spirituality is where they find their sense of community. So one is to find that community that also allows them to feel that. I think the important bit is to have communities that allow you to be authentic and allow you to be your own self. Mm-hmm. That's the most important thing. The second bit is about, we learning when to switch off. While we cannot run away from technology, we can learn how to use technology.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Like when you're back from, it's like, people are watching Netflix and they're still scrolling through their phone.
Oh my God, literally I met someone day before yesterday and I recommended some show and she asked me, is it a show I have to pay attention to or can I be scrolling on my phone while watching it? I was like, aise kaise? But it's real.
But it is, no? You don't want...
मैं show pause करके फिर scroll करती हूँ फिर unpause करती हूँ.
But perhaps that time out is genuinely for them to switch their brain off.
Probably, yeah.
It's just that stimuli that you want, it's hitting
White
you.
noise.
You don't have to absorb it. You don't have to really get involved with it or follow any plot lines or anything like that, which could be relaxing to some people.
Yeah.
Like, why do we like sitcoms?
Yeah.
It's because there's just this family of 5 living in this perfect set home and everything is laughing. You're like, it's fine, it's fine.
Yeah.
Because you switch it off and you've left that situation.
At the same time, you are overstraining your brain's cognitive capacity.
Yeah, you should take a nap.
You should be, the brain is not wired to multitask. So you are sorting your clothes out, you're watching something, and at the same time you're scrolling through your phone. You're doing 3 activities. If you're going to strain your brain, it's going to get exhausted, and exhaustion is deeply linked to anxiety. Exhaustion is also deeply linked to your ability to feel sad, because you feel I am just too tired to even enjoy anything.
Oh my God.
So at the end of it, while people also use the chatter on the screen to quieten things in their
mind.
Yeah, that's what I
Yes.
mean. It's like that switch off. It's white noise. That's just kind of hitting you and you're like,
It's just
tuned
that
out.
in the short term it may work, but in the long term, once the noise shuts down, the thoughts will come with a vengeance.
ये भी बहुत सही बात बोली आपने. भारी. Sorry, I need a moment inside. क्योंकि अभी सब अपना patterns देख रहे हैं. In my head, I am to going through my life. But you said we have to like relearn how to use technology also and use it better.
Yes, we can't give away technology. You know,
No.
we are not reaching that point, and
And I don't think we
but
need
I
to
have
also.
one-
we don't need to.
It has aided.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
it
it
has
has
life.
aided.
It
in
has
a lot
aided.
of ways.
Yeah.
But I have one baby hack for this. It's something that works for me, so I want to share it with our listeners. We follow the kind of content that also is like interesting and is feeding your brain good things. Maybe following like a paparazzi page and just constantly seeing pap pics is not going to help you. But there are a lot of accounts on social media also which are giving like good information, interesting quotes. Like me, if you are into motivational quotes, the positive
Wow,
affirmations.
I cannot believe you just plugged
I
your
have
own
plugged
Instagram.
it in, not mine. No, not like that. I'm saying to follow other.
Oh, because it sounded like you were saying
नहीं,
to
नहीं,
follow you.
मैं तो कुछ भाई please मैं तो कुछ बकवास डालती हूँ, but like actual pages which like will share. There are a lot of like mental health pages, a lot of
Can
like
we,
positivity pages. You know,
Can we
like that.
Can we recommend not
Social
seeking this
media.
on social media?
If we are relearning how to use social media, so if right now you're
No, but if you're addicted to your phone or like you need
Yes.
to be on your phone, why does it have to be that you have to open these apps which are about social media? Why can't it be that there are so many apps that give you the top news in really short, interesting ways. There are apps which give you world affairs in a comic book manner. There are applications which teach you how to do different skills. There are different applications which do like on art and music, and there are different ways to engage your mind. I don't care if this sounds preachy. I just think that if we are going to be on our phones, and that is some sort of addiction that we /me have totally. I recently downloaded the Sketch app on my phone, and I really like
doodle.
it. And the days that I don't have to drive, I use that instead of scrolling on Instagram and Twitter, because Twitter makes me angry and Instagram just makes me like, yeah, my page doesn't look like that. I try so hard for an aesthetic. So I don't want to feel those things. It's
Yeah.
not necessary. And none of those things are adding any value
to your
to my
life. No,
life
no.
or personality or knowledge.
correct.
So I think this following
Yes,
meme
sorry.
pages, yaar, mat karo. There are thousands of them. And memes to come on daily basis. We share them also
With
every
each
single
other
day.
all the time. Yeah.
And some days are beautiful just because you forget your phone at home.
Yeah.
Or you forget to look at the phone.
That
Yeah, those days are great actually when you're too busy to look at your phone.
nighttime mode, actually, I
Yes.
enjoy it. I use it a
Yeah,
lot
I
in the
love
day.
Yes, so do I.
What is nighttime mode?
Means it turns all the notifications and all like not important ones. They just go away. So your screen is first of all not flooded. Also,
Right.
your calls come. You can silence some of the calls and keep some calls on priority. Like you can configure your phone to
I
work
to
for
just
you.
put my phone on airplane mode whenever I feel like.
Okay, see, that doesn't work for
No,
me. I
because you
can't
have
do
a
that. I'm at work. I can't switch off my phone. I don't wish to, though. Like I said earlier, I don't think we need to do away
No,
with technology.
even
We
I
just need to
don't-
manage it better.
Yes, I think we need to figure out our relationship with social media. You need to figure out how long do you want to use, whether it's Instagram, whether it's Twitter, and when do you stop it. And, I think
Stop
the
it 5 minutes ago.
And it's like, everybody who uses social media will say like, oh, I didn't realize when the 1 hour just passed
Yeah.
by. I started at 11 and it's 2 o'clock and I'm still looking random pictures that don't mean a thing to me.
You know, there's what will really make you feel bad, and sometimes it should, is that when you look at your app usage.
Yes.
And you see how much time you spend this week on a certain application. Guys, if it makes you feel bad, it should. Now hold on to that bad feeling and do something about it. Like, I have stopped using Instagram as much after I saw how much I was using it.
Yeah, वो screen time दिखाता है ना, तो अभी तो
Yes.
मतलब
Means it was too embarrassing. I was like, I've wasted this time. I could have been doing something else.
Absolutely. So one of the things which I've also spoken and written extensively about, also in the book, is about how on days when we are feeling low, when we are feeling sad, when we are feeling anxious, we are more likely to spend that time on social media. We are constantly, the days where we are feeling extremely low, extremely anxious, or feeling even worried over a project not done, we will spend long durations on social media in the hope that we will find something novel, something which will just alleviate our anxiety and make it go away. When, it's
the
like,
root is something else.
It's quicksand, but people just think that it will fix it, but it leaves you tired and exhausted at the end of it. And when you're tired and exhausted, you will feel, whether it's nervous, whether it's anxious, you will not feel in control, right? Nervousness, anxiety is just a state where I'm not feeling that I'm in charge.
And you're not in control of your feelings, of your emotions, or how you react
thoughts
to something.
Absolutely. You also feel foggy in your head, right? On days when you're nervous or anxious, any of it.
And in general, I think the way that the world has changed so dynamically, from our commute to our work environments and the workplace and our relationships, there are more triggers now for stress, for anxiety, for nervousness, or whatever those facets are. There are more. So,
including something as simple as traffic. Like if you lived in Bombay 5-10 years back, the traffic situation was not so bad, right?
So BuzzFeed has done a video on this, the correlation of mental health and traffic, and how it is a real thing.
It is a real thing, because people are also, like I keep saying this, that we are also anxious based on when we book a cab, how far is the cab away from us. If it's 5 minutes away, you're getting late for work, you'll cancel it to book another cab that's 2 minutes away.
Yeah.
So there is a clear correlation to how the traffic, monsoon, for example.
Oh boy.
Like this year, there's so many people, who talked about how monsoon led to their anxiety, the road conditions, all the infrastructure, they are all
the development that's going on. Mumbai is becoming harder and harder. And privilege also plays a big part into this, of course. If you have to sit into a car, your driver's taking you from point A to point B, theek hai. If you have to still get out of your house, find an auto, Uber has cancelled on you, it's pouring. So many factors are affecting you. It's
absolutely
different for each person.
And the concerns are just increasing. So it's also the changing landscape of how our lives have evolved over the years.
Yeah, I think in our own lifetime, which is small baby 27, 26 years old, I can see that difference.
Yeah.
From the time of accepting mental health and understanding this whole world and the facets around it, in itself, you can see the difference. Like say 21, 22, when you realize that, I need to start paying attention to my well-being, and upstairs and downstairs all matter. From that time to being 27 now, you can see the conversation has really changed. It's evolved, and I hope it keeps evolving. I hope it's more inclusive, more accepting of.
But on that note, I actually do want to ask you something else also, because a lot of our questions had to do with the family and the stigma attached to mental health, and how do people tell their parents that this is something I'm going through? How if your family is only not supporting you, तो आप अगला step कैसे ले सकते हो?
So, Agla Station.
That's true. For a lot, I think in India still there's a huge stigma and there's a huge concern over how families are still not the most open. When it comes to adult clients, they mostly pay for their own sessions or they reach out to a professional, but a lot of them still don't tell their parents about it. Or even if they are on medication, they are in therapy or medication, but not on medication, but not informing family, because they're also worried that the family will not understand. So if you have to tell your family, I would go back to, even if it's depression, it's the intensity and frequency of those episodes, right? Like you can't get out of bed. You're feeling so low that you have not been able to go out and meet anybody in the last 10 days. Or even if you're at home, you have not been able to take a bath like for 2 days, 3 days in a row. All those are signs around hygiene, which are signs of depression. So begin by having a dialogue with the family about the frequency, intensity, and how it's interfering with your functioning, right? Like, so, when people are struggling with low moods, families sometimes can't see it. It's invisible. And in most cases, like anxiety, like you were talking about, or like you were talking about, the child who comes back to a bully, families can't see it,
Yeah.
right? Our phones are such private spaces. You can make an attempt to, when there are these videos that speak about it, or when you tell them about your symptom, what helps sometimes is that telling them about the symptoms and telling them also about the progress you have made. Sometimes it also helps to involve them in the process and to tell them that it can be dealt with, because in an Indian setup also parents fall into guilt.
या
कि
हमने क्या किया कि मेरे बच्चे को ये हो गया, हमने गलत किया
कि ये मेरी गलती थी,
Yeah.
शायद मेरे को ध्यान देना चाहिए
Yeah.
था. It's like in India, even if your children don't get married, parents still take the blame.
Yeah.
शायद मेरी कुछ गलती थी, मैंने अच्छी तरह रेज नहीं किया, that they are, so a lot of it is about, you'll have to be realistic about. Sometimes your parents may not understand about it, and that's not a reflection on you also in that sense. At the same time, you need to have that narrative and involve them in the process in some way, where you tell them what does anxiety, depression, loneliness look like for you. Because also their ecosystem was very different from what our ecosystem is, right?
Exactly.
And ecosystems are not the same. It's like, I often say, like marriage has become this new Aadhaar card, which the society needs, but often people don't need it. So having this conversation with parents also seems odd, because they feel you need it, but you don't need it. Everybody else seems to need it.
Yeah.
No, that's very fair, and I think that's a constructive way of approaching your parents or relatives or whoever it is that I think that applies to whoever it is that you're struggling to admit to. Like, even it's like some of the questions were, how do I tell my friends or my partner or my
Any
siblings, close
near
people?
dear ones,
How do I rely on my friends? I think what you suggested is to kind of explain to them how it's affecting your own life, and when they see that that's clearly not, it's not okay, and it's affecting you, it's now detrimental to your growth as a person, that's when it kind of becomes real, and you can see that, oh, this is shit, this is real. It's
Absolutely, and nobody other than you will know of the intensity and how debilitating it is other than you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Also, we all put masks, right? So if you're struggling at work, your anxiety, nobody will see at work.
Yeah.
It will show up in the night when you're sitting alone in your bed and you're struggling with that panic attack, and you want to just go and take that shower because, you're feeling so anxious.
We have great poker faces, all of us.
But I also want to ask you one thing, Sonali. So for these people who say are dealing with their parents and these issues and all that, say they are still dependent on their parents and they can't ask their parents for money to go to therapy, what are things people can do in their own time to help themselves with their mental health?
So I think, maybe at the end of the episode, or, when we put it out there, we can put out a list of helplines that I've labeled all over the country.
We are going to do that.
Yes.
We're going to put up a website link which has in all the major cities kind of people that can be reached out to, helplines as well as
crowdsourced.
Yeah.
So there's a crowdsourced list of therapists across the country. There's also helplines which are free, which don't charge you anything.
Yes.
So for a lot of people who need help but they can't reach out to anybody, they should reach out, to these helplines and be able to talk. And there are like about 7-8 of them in the city, not in the city, but in the country, which I've labeled.
Okay.
And for others, sometimes it helps, when, you can talk to friends about it, and if you are in schools, colleges, institute, where there are therapists available, mental health professionals, or a teacher who listens to you, you can choose to trust them and talk to them, or even your friends, right? The support, the idea is you have support. The idea is you have somebody who understands it. The solution, therapist is one part of the solution. We need to build solutions at a community level where as a society we understand that mental health needs to be addressed, and it doesn't stop at a therapist. There's far more things one can do beyond that and everything. Or there are also a lot of teachable moments, right? Like, Dear Zindagi was a teachable moment in itself. I don't think the work that mental health professionals did over the years, when Dear Zindagi came, it just brought about a new wave of awareness. The way so many people talked about mental health just changed with the movie coming in. Right? So the narratives need to go far deeper. Like I often tell people, okay, use that movie as a teachable moment to have a conversation about, just like Alia Bhatt, even I am making to therapy. You can just drop it subtly if it's going on television. So I think it's, the idea is to address your concerns. And when medication is needed, then to address that at the end of it, but building community level solutions.
That's awesome.
That's cool. So thank you so much for being here. This was really, I think, enlightening and educative.
That brings us to the end of our episode, does it?
Yes, it has been. I think you have a lot of thinking and introspecting and
I don't think this is the last of mental health that we're going to speak of, because I feel there is a lot left to unpack.
And it kind of, I think we mention it in a lot of our other episodes because it does affect many facets of our life, and our stage that we're currently in of this late 20s is
mid, early, late, all the 20s. Just people who are approaching adulthood.
Yeah, there's a lot of things we're struggling with, and it's important to recognize that and kind of address it in the best way that you can so that you get the right help.
And thank you for having me. And I think this conversation is itself a step into building that community.
Yes.
Where people at least can feel validated that if they have struggles, if they are, struggling with something, it's real.
Yes.
You don't need to
feel bad about it or embarrassed.
हाँ, एकदम नॉर्मल है, सबको होता है, तो सब डील करेंगे धीरे धीरे. No problem, baby steps at a time. We will. हम होंगे कामयाब.
Also, I read this really nice self-published article which was talking about how podcasts are just amazing for your mental health. So I think
especially I think Agla Station Adulthood के बारे में बात की थी ना?
Yeah. That was mentioned. I think it was mentioned. Thank
you for listening, friends. We'll be back next week with another episode. If you liked this podcast, please don't forget to check out all the other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. Also, you can follow us on our social media. We are at IVM Podcasts on Twitter and Instagram. And Ayushi, how will they reach you?
Atharv knows. I really need to stop plugging him. And if you want to reach out to me, I am just Ayushi on Twitter and AyushiA9 on Instagram. And Tash?
I am at Rytasha on Instagram. And Sonali, you are on social media too, right?
Yes.
Can our listeners reach out to you?
Yes, definitely. So on Twitter, I am at Gupta Sonali. On Instagram, I am at Mental Health with Sonali.
Epic.
It's very direct. It's very
to the point.
You can remember it.
Okay.
All right, guys. Catch you next week.
Bye.
रिश्ते में तो हम तुम्हारे पॉडकास्ट लगते हैं. नाम है फुटबॉल शुटबॉल.
Presenting Football Shortball, a show about three friends discussing our favorite game over a beer. Sometimes 3, maybe even 5. Hi, I'm Shiva, and with me are my two sidekicks, Gaurav Sapre and Karthik Iyer.
Sidekick? You mean like Batman's Robin or Van Persie Robin?
No, I mean like Alexis Sanchez, but with a little more skill than just playing the piano.
Just shows how the best players at Arsenal are mere bench warmers at United.
Oh, thank you, Iyer. But you're a Fulham supporter, so whenever you say anything to support me, I question my beliefs.
Just like how Griezmann would say, एक बार मैंने जो decision ले लिया, तो मैं अपने आप की भी नहीं सुनता.
Banter aside, we will talk match reports, transfer rumors, top controversies, fantasy football picks, and so much more. So grab a beer and tune in to Football Shortball every Wednesday on the IVM Podcast app, website, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Do you wish you were smarter? Well, so do we. But the next best thing?
We could make you sound smarter.
And to help you with this endeavor, we are Simplified, a podcast that attempts to break down the complex world around you with a little knowledge, a lot of poor jokes, and a ton of random trivia.
Episodes out every Monday
on the IVM Podcast app or wherever you get your podcasts.
See ya!